So welcome everyone, welcome Mark, and thank you for tuning in and taking your time to join this very experimental forum podcast and
Love it.
conversation. And yeah, my name is Arthur Pollins. I'm breathwork and mindfulness coach, and Mark is my dear friend, and I really believe in state of equanimity and calm, and we're looking for this state. And for me, that state means just a lack of anxiety, overwhelm, and just being able to face that. And now over the times I've known Mark, he helped me a lot with thinking and approaching different aspects of my life and my work. And since having conversations with Mark over the Instagram and seeing his lives, and I really saw his perspective on the way this whole thing might affect us, and it kind of was a really shifting perspective of mine in terms of not necessarily seeing this all as just as an opportunity, but also realistic situation, how it will impact our future, how it will impact people who are working, who are self-employed, who are working for companies, who are running their own businesses, and how it impacts our generation, and how we might look at this years down the line and see how this was a pivotal moment for our society and our culture. And I really believe Mark had a really amazing points on all of that. So I wanted to interview you, Mark, the first of this podcast, and kind of get your perspective and actually steal an hour of your time selfishly, and also invite some other people who could contribute to conversation. So how this will work, we will have, let's say, half of this hour is going to be, I'm going to be asking Mark questions, and then we'll open up the floor for any of your questions, guys, any things you wanted to discuss, or anything else that you could ask Mark and share. So you can drop, in the meantime, you can drop any questions in the chat, and at the end we will unmute some of you, and you can ask questions directly and participate in conversation, and just all experimental and seeing how it works, and getting the most of this conversation, and kind of having a bit of calm space through all of this. And as you know, my interest is in mindfulness, and actually how do we manage our minds in the best way. And I see you, Mark, as one of the inspirations for myself in terms of how I work.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate
and how I run my business, I guess, for lack of a better word. And also one of the important factors, since I've been talking to you since we met and since we became friends, is the importance of the purpose. And you talk a lot about the purpose in your speaking engagements, as far as I know, and the importance of service, and how we can find the purpose easily through trying to serve, through finding a way how we can serve others and get joy from that. So I guess that's it for me for my introduction, a random introduction, but I guess no one better can introduce you as you yourself. So please tell us about yourself.
Do you know what? Can I ask something? And I know this is really selfish of me, and this is unplanned. But I think it would be such an amazing opportunity for anybody listening to this after the podcast, people watching this, people live, that you take us through like one breath. Like even if we just take all collectively one deep breath, so we can get present, get grounded. And I can't think of anyone better than you to like lead us through this one breath. It doesn't have to be something deep or cyclical, but I just thought, how cool is this? Like how many times we get an opportunity to slow down, people listening to this, people watching this now from Mexico to Greenwich,
Exactly.
So anyway, I'd love that. That's an invitation. If you're up for it, then I'd love for you to lead us through that.
Let's do it. Definitely. So yeah. So start by closing your eyes, and whatever you're sitting down, make sure you're comfortable, relaxed. And just for a second, just tune in with the weight of your body on a chair, on a couch, on the floor. Notice the contact. And then we'll do a series of deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. So that will help us reset our nervous system just in a quick manner. So let's start by breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Active inhales and passive exhales. Keep breathing. Getting into the rhythm with these breaths. Relaxed exhalations, relaxing it with every single exhale. Softening your body with exhalation. And now take a long and deep breath in, all the way in. An easy side out. And hold your breath. And hold your breath after the exhale. Notice the quiet and stillness. And now we take a deep breath in. In, hold, and side out. And we're back.
Thanks, man. I love that. So what was the question?
Let's start from the beginning. So tell us about yourself and what do you do?
Yeah.
What's your day job?
Yeah. So hi, welcome everyone tuning in live and listening to this. This is so cool. Like just this format alone is one of the reasons why I get excited to wake up in the morning, because we can find hope and innovation and creativity everywhere as long as we're willing to look for it. And this is a new format for me, like doing a live podcast virtually, which I think is really cool. So the vast majority of people will have no idea who I am, and my ego is not bruised, just a little bit. But my name is Mark Leruste, and I'm the founder and host of the Unconventionalists and the Ministry of Purpose. And effectively, what I try and do is help people have a sense of meaning and purpose in the work they do. And I focused over the years, work with entrepreneurs and founders, but more recently with teams, organizations, and their leaders. So coaching executives and CEOs and working, sleeves rolled up with teams. And what I'm fascinated to figure out is there's a couple of things that I fundamentally believe in. One of them is that everyone needs purpose. Like we all have a deep desire to have a sense of purpose. I gave a TEDx talk. If people want to go and check it out, go and listen to that. I dive deeper into the topic. But effectively, I talk about why we go wrong when it comes down to trying to finding our purpose. The second thing is I believe that being yourself is good for business, which can sound contradictory to a lot of the things we've heard and been told, especially since I spent 10 years working in companies from the private sector to corporate education and charity. But I believe that one of my life's mission is to eradicate career misery in the workplace. And I do that by helping leaders to build purpose-driven organizations where people can show up as their true selves. And that's kind of what I've been doing. That's kind of what I've been dedicating my work. And what's interesting is that the way I do it's changed since COVID-19. The why I do it has actually been amplified, which I believe now more than ever, we need leaders to engage their teams and to give them a reason to stay optimistic, stay connected, and stay productive and engaged during these challenging times. And it's been amazing. I've had conversations with charities, with companies. I'm currently with a conversation with a bank. And what you see is a universal truth that we're all going through, which uncertainty brings fear. And we get an opportunity to choose. What do we do with that fear? Do we let it cripple us, or do we let it fuel us? And I think the response between fear and excitement can sometimes be very slim. And when you talk to musicians, often say, or actors or performers, they often say that, Bruce Springsteen talks about this, that he still gets the same gut reaction and fear before he goes on stage, but he sees that as a good sign. That means his body's ready to perform at its best, and he's going to deliver something unique, and he's actually still looking for that feeling. So effectively, in a nutshell, that's what I do, and it doesn't define who I am. In a way, it's kind of the work I do, and I enjoy it. I really love, for example, helping people I care about who are doing great work, like you, Arthur, like just giving some tips and helps and guidance. And I'm a dad, that I think defines me even more, in the sense that I've got 2 kids. challenging, to say the least, living in a small flat on the third floor of a building in the city with kids not sleeping at night, potty training, all that stuff. And again, I was just writing this to someone who contacted me on LinkedIn to book me for a workshop. It was around embracing the good and the bad and being grateful for both. And I'm not saying it's been easy every day. There's been days where I'm like, I really don't like the situation and I would much rather be in a different situation. And there are days I'm like, okay, what's the resistance and what's the gift? And can I find the gift in this resistance? And if so, then what's available to me? So that's a nutshell. And of course, I've got a podcast called The Unconventionalists where I interviewed you.
Yes.
It's a popular episode where I even got a critic on iTunes saying I was interrupting you too much. And they gave me a 1-star rating. But the reason why I'm sharing this is that we all go through these different things. And I think there's like this facade that a lot of us feel like we need to put up, whether that's on social media or at work or with our friends. And what I try and do is break down that barrier, break down that mask by creating moments of radical honesty. Because ultimately, I believe in one thing is that we all want to be seen, heard, and appreciated, whether that's supported or respected.
And so you just now you said about breaking down that facade and finding your honest self and your expression. Was that always something that came naturally to you to be outspoken and speak directly, or it's something you had to develop, or there was some situation that happened that made you reconsider this? What were your influences?
Yeah, great question. No, 100% not. I mean, so this is going to sound really weird for me to share this, but it's to give you a perspective. So I ran a workshop about 1.5 years ago. And one of the participants is someone who it wasn't a very close friend, but someone who knew me, and he knew me like years back from the kind of, we worked in the same field, in the same industry. And at one point during the workshop, he stopped me and said, like, what have you done to transform into the person you are? Because you are like way more grounded, way more like on, like there's just like a bit more of you. And what did you do? And I was kind of reflecting on that. And the truth is, it's a process. It's things that happen to me in life, challenges, really difficult moments, adversity, but also to do the work. And you and I talked about this. Like, we talked about this when this crisis hit. We both said, what's interesting is people who've been working on themselves, we're trying to develop self-awareness, looking at our shadows, looking at the stuff we don't want to face. And maybe people listening can relate to this. The more you do that kind of work, the more you are almost more apt to deal with uncertainty and challenges, because you know that, like, especially stoicism, like we talk about this sometimes, you know, but this whole idea that you don't control external events, you only control your thoughts and your actions. And it's kind of been helpful. So look, there's definitely a moment in time. I still to this day have things that I do that I go, why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why am I sound like that? That's not who I am. So I still play a persona up to a point. I'd be lying if I told you I'm 100% genuine all the time. But the one thing I've always strived to do, and this has been at least for the last 6 years that I've been kind of building my business, I always wanted to be the same person you see me right now online, the same person you see me on stage, the same person you see me delivering a workshop or a talk, or the same person you have over a beer. And I think, I don't know, you saw me talk, right?
Yes.
So so you've seen me in different, and I believe that's true. I believe that I am the same person. And I think that's one thing that often people ask me, is that question, is that how do you get to be the same person in these different roles?
Yes.
And that's been like years of work. Honestly, it's been coaching, mentoring, training, books, seminars, all that stuff, just investing a lot in my training and understanding. And you always come back to the same thing, like, which is interesting, is that ultimately that you're enough and that you're lovable for who you are, not what you do. I mean, those weird two fundamental truths, I don't know why I went that, if people listen to this, you can chat a lot, write in the chat if anything resonates, if something lands, just let us know, right? Like, type in if there's something that we're saying that lands for you. But I do believe that that's what we're all fundamentally chasing. We're just chasing that feeling of, am I enough and am I lovable? And if you can answer those two questions, then you're probably ahead of gazillion people, like 99.9% of the population. And I still struggle with those questions to this day. Like, I still feel like I'm not doing enough. I still feel like I'm not. I still feel like there's so much more I need to do, need to say, and that's dangerous, right? Like, we talk about this. There's a dangerous gap that you can create between where you are, where you think you should be, and what you make up will be that kind of unhappiness, uncertainty, and misery. But yeah, it's still work in progress. But I'm more definitely, once upon a time, I was not the same that you're seeing today. Like the younger Mark, seeing me now, it'd be like, what? Like, I used to sell weed. I used to have like shaved head. I thought I was Eminem. Like it was, I had dreadlocks at one point. I used to skateboard. I mean, I went through all these chameleon phases. And I've been coming home more to who I am. And, the older you get, the less you care.
Yeah, and I really can resonate. Obviously, we had these conversations about preparation for situations like this, because there's not really any way how to prepare for the future. Oftentimes we think we have control over things, but oftentimes we just don't. And the only thing we can control is our own personal states and investing in ourselves, in our resilience and our mental fortitude in some ways. And
can I share something real quick on that?
Yes, of course.
Sorry to interrupt. So this is something I talk about. Like I've been running these live workshops for organizations around how to stay connected, optimistic, and positive during COVID-19. And one of the first things I kind of explain to people is you've got to understand the walking contradiction that we all live through. And that is by nature, the way that we are designed and built as human beings, as a species, is to survive, right? That's what we're trying to do, reproduce and survive. But the coping mechanisms are as follow. We try and avoid pain, we seek pleasure, we minimize energy consumption. So our brain literally is constantly trying to figure out, how can I protect and predict? Those are the two fundamental things we're all seeking at any given moment. How do I feel safe? How do I know that I'm going to be okay? And then you live. So this is like the kind of the vessel, right? But then you look at the environment, which is life and this planet and this world, and it is by nature uncertain. Like it is by nature completely unpredictable, because you don't know what today will be made of, let alone tomorrow, let alone a week, a year. And so we have these two things cohabiting on a constant basis. We have human beings which are seeking predictability and safety, and we have a world which is uncertain and at times unsafe in that kind of way. And so if you understand that, you need to figure out, how do I hijack my operating system, i.e. how do I hijack my brain trying to protect at all costs and keep control? Because if you go a layer below, and this gets a little bit kind of deep right now, but what's happening is that COVID-19 has resurfaced what has always been present, which is our inability to control, and our inability to control life itself. Like, we're all going to die. We don't know when. It's all happening. But avoiding that is what our subconscious enables us to survive and thrive. But for those of us who've been asking ourselves these questions, what happens, you realize that, oh, actually this need to control comes from this idea that I need to control the outcome of life. But you cannot. Like, you can't control, right? So like, one of the first things I talk about with teams and organizations is, if you want to thrive in uncertain times, you need to let go of control, because you don't know what the future is going to look like. You don't know yet what you will come up with and what kind of ideas, pivots, innovation, creativity that you and your team are going to come up with in the next week. And you need to let go in order to become the person you need to become. Does that make sense?
It does. And this, actually, the letting go of the control obviously helps with finding the creativity and allowing you to adjust to a certain situation. If you're constantly trying to control, you're not seeing the opportunities. You're just trying to maintain things as they are, even though they're changing.
And it's scary. I want to normalize this, okay? Because it's great for us to just chat about this and you should let go of control.
Yeah.
It's scary. Like, for most of us, it's kind of like, it's this gripping fear, and there's a reality. Some of us, are really struggling right now. Maybe we've lost some family. We haven't seen, our friends and employees. Some of us have been made redundant. There's so much going on. Like, I'm not making little of that. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that COVID-19 is not like creating that. It's just putting us in front with a situation, which is actually, we don't control that much. We might have kid ourselves over the years thinking that by creating all these things to make our life more comfortable, that we can control and predict. We can't. And so the moment you realize that, the moment you kind of understand that actually there is a gift in letting go of control, is the moment you start, the old cliche, what's in it for you versus what's happening to you. Like, right? Like, why is this happening to me versus, wait, this is happening for me. And when you make that switch, when you make that mindset shift, it really helps you to kind of change your experience, change the way you perceive. And by doing that, then it's a ripple effect. And, you can start being more creative, resourceful, and all that stuff.
And that's a great perspective to have, and obviously honest perspective, and I remember one of your Instagram lives, you were talking about the importance of this situation. And for me, that was a really, or significance of current situation. You were comparing this to other big events that happen in our world that shape the future. And at the moment, a lot of us might be still hoping or thinking that we're going to go back to world as it was.
Yeah.
Exactly as it was. But you kind of, after that live, I was like, oh, things are not probably coming back to business as usual.
I remember that one. It was early. It was like a few weeks ago when people were still going about their lives. I remember this because I made a video around, I want to say the 10th of March, something like that. And I told people, I was like, you guys need to stay home. You don't understand what's happening, what's coming and stuff. My wife was the one who was like telling me way back when, she was like, this is going to get like messy and no one's really seeing it coming. So what I was trying to explain is, so one of the things that I used to do quite a bit is going into organizations and talk about intergenerational relationships and especially about how to better lead and inspire millennials in the workplace. That's kind of my bread and butter. I'm currently writing a book about it, and it feels like it's more relevant now than ever.
Yes.
And so the idea was effectively to say, if you want to understand a generation, you need to understand the events that shape that generation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So effectively, if you look at, baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Y, look at some of the events that happened during that lifetime, and they usually span about 20 years, right? Give or take the generation. So people will argue about this, but when we talk about millennials, we usually mean the early 1980s up until about 2000s, right? Because that's why they're called millennials, because they went at the turn of millennials as they were growing up. But when you look at some of the events that happened for us, we had the internet completely changed the way that we operate in the world. 9/11 happened, and you start the financial crisis of 2008 was a huge one. I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially for millennials. Millennials were the worst hit in terms of financial opportunities, but also it changed our dynamic in the way that we think about work. So let me just give you a real quick insight. What happened is that during the financial crisis, the old promise that work hard for a company for a number of years, you'll be rewarded with loyalty and eventually a gold watch and you can retire and be happy, evaporated. Why? Because people like me who had a dad who worked for 30 years in a company was made redundant from one day to the next. And so what happened is that unconsciously we unbroke that promise that we had with all institutions and said, if I'm going to be working for a company that I don't enjoy and I can be made redundant at any moment, why would I do that? Why would I not try and find work I actually enjoy? And at least if I fail, I get fired, at least it'll be something, it was worth it. And so it changed completely the perspective around work. So a lot of people think that, millennials are a problem or they're challenging, but actually they often point out the challenges, they often point out the problems. And so when this started, when COVID-19 started, one of the things I said a few weeks back was, this will be one of these events that we'll look back in time and said, this shaped us. And I think it's even more so now than a few weeks back when I said this. And look, these are all predictions. Like they're all just kind of stuff I make up. So it's not truth. It's not the reality. But here's what I was arguing. I was arguing that for those of us who were raised by baby boomers, and my brother's a Gen X, we were raised by parents who were raised by parents who went through the war, right? And so what happens is that you have certain things that are ingrained in you in the way that you're educated, the way that you were brought up. So for my parents, for example, my grandparents, it was scarcity. It was all about, you need to make sure you keep and save things. You need to eat all your food, don't waste anything, and be grateful to have a job. That was very much kind of like the way they were raised. And that's kind of like the story that we got brought on. But when you look at what's happening now and how this is going to shape us as future generations, I think it would be naive to think that we're going to go back to the world as we know it. I think there is no way we're going to go back to the way that we know it. It doesn't mean that what is coming is worse. And that's really important because I think a lot of people can be nostalgic about the past. But hear me out. So 9/11 changed the way we travel. I don't know if you remember, before 9/11, the security measures to fly were completely different. Like, yes, you didn't have to wait so long in security. You could bring in a liter bottle in your backpack, right? Like, you could bring all the stuff that you couldn't do today. Like now you've got to have 100 milliliters, liquids in a small pouch, like all these measures that change the way we travel. And I think COVID-19 is going to change the way we relate to bacteria, to viruses, to germs, to the way that we interact and how we can transmit diseases. The same way I think that in the 80s, HIV, when it hit and people freaked out and it changed the way that people had sex, it changed the way that we had sexual interactions. I think the way forward is going to be very unknown. I like people say, oh, we're going to go back in May. No way in hell is this going back to normality in May. If anything, it's going to last until the summer. But the things that I'm interested to see, and these are like just speculations, right? But I'm interested to see a few things. If we do go back to live events, are they going to be as mass in numbers as they used to be? Or are they going to be smaller, more intimate events? Okay, that's number one. Number two, what regulations and measures are going to be put in place to make sure that we are safer? So maybe we'll have a thermometer check when you come into the events that measures your temperature to see actually you can't come in because you've got about 37.5. Maybe there'll be hand sanitizers systems everywhere we go, and that the way that we configure hotels, restaurants, and households will change by having hand washing early on at the entrance phase rather than in the bathroom, just in the bathroom. Like just these small things like hugs and shaking hands. And, before, when I used to work in a company, if I had a flu, I would show up at work thinking that's the right thing to do. I'm a trooper. Like I'm a soldier. I'm going to show up, even if I'm like dying, I'm sneezing, all this stuff. I'm on my computer dying, but I'm there. That's not happening. Like I don't think anyone now who's got a flu symptom would be like, I'm not coming in. I don't want to spread my disease or germs. And I think our kids and our kids' kids, what's going to happen, the same way that our parents were being so obsessed about don't waste any food, we're going to be obsessed with wash your hands. Like, have you washed your hands? Like, that is going to become like an obsession where kids are going to be like, oh, enough with the washing the hands. Yes, my hands are, yes, no, I didn't touch stranger's hands. No, I didn't hug them. That's going to be an interesting shift to see. And again, I think it's speculation, but when you start seeing history and you start seeing patterns, you start seeing things repeat. And I think we're just going to elevate to a new normal. I don't think we're going to eradicate live events. But I think it's going to be just different. And the other thing I think we're going to have to get used to potentially is an on and off system, which means that until we have a vaccine for this influenza, which by the way, there'll be other influenzas and other pandemics in our lifetime or our kids or not in our grandkids, because we're constantly surrounded by viruses in this environment. But what's going to be interesting is to see until the vaccine comes, how will we adapt as a society to open and close operations? So that means that, hey, schools are closing for the next 6 weeks. We need to calm this pandemic down. We're opening up them again. So our kids are going to be used to like, oh, we're at home and now we're at school. Oh, no, we're homeschooling. Oh, we're back at school. Like there's just going to be these transitions that we're all going to have to get used to. Again, it's speculation. I don't know if it's going to happen, but does that make sense?
It does totally make sense. And also for me, it's really important to hear this, was to hear this, because it kind of normalized the situation in some ways. And if we discuss this, if we have an open conversation about this, if we contemplate what does this mean, we probably can prepare better our own mindset for the future and start looking at this as not necessarily as a short-term thing that we need to wait out, but how can we adapt? How can we do our work, whatever our work is, if we're self-employed, if we run a business or we work for a company, and how do we find a purposeful contribution to do and still feel like we are contributing, even if we're locked in, still have this access to our own purpose.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the early IG stories I did kind of live session was around, if you can't go digital, if you can't go to a door, you're going to struggle. Because what happened very quickly that we saw is that people were trying to shift their services to being delivering to your door, whether that's restaurants, fruit and veg shops, anything that could deliver to your door, then they were going to go for that. And anything that could be delivered digitally, they were shifting to that. Anything shy of that, people who didn't manage to get to one of the either really struggled. And so I think what was been interesting for me to see is that, because you and I know this, right? But I remember early March, maybe 10th of March, something like that, I remember saying, this is going to be lasting for a while. The reason why I knew this is because of, I have a friend in Hong Kong, and back in January, he was telling me about what was going on. I did not know that it would be on this scale. I feel really stupid about that. I'll be honest with you. The thing that I hate about myself is it's a bit of a big word, but that I beat myself up about is, why did I not see this coming? Like my mate in Hong Kong was telling us about this. We were laughing in a group of WhatsApp going you're going to get stuck. Good luck with that. And then suddenly it just felt like overnight, we just smashed in the face and all had to get locked in and wear masks and gloves and all this stuff. So I think that's going to be an interesting shift around, if you are able to let go of the need of having a clear date for when the new normal is going to start. once you let go of that, and if you go, we don't know how long this could go from September till December. They're saying now that, elderly people at risk aren't going to be able to go roam around free the way they used to until January 2021, because there's no vaccine that's going to come up for the next 12, 18 months. So you've got to start understanding and shifting it. And it's all about control and acceptance. And I think that's what the hardest is. And yes. I joke about this in my sessions, but I talk about the 5 stages of grief. And if you look at the 5 stages of grief, they're exactly the same stages that we've all gone through with COVID-19. And this is how I kind of kick off my sessions by saying, where are you currently on these 5 steps of the journey? Are you bargaining? Are you angry? Are you, all this stuff. And I think what happens that I've seen the shift is when people go, it is what it is. What can I do in order to make the most of this? And that's where creativity really comes at play. I've never seen people around me in this world being so creative as right now. My friend was an art director for a really big hotel chain based in Amsterdam. She said this really interesting fact. She said, some of the best music and art was born out of some really difficult economic times in history.
Yes.
Because often through struggle comes, greatness. And so we are going to see some amazing stuff come out of this, like whether that's art, culture, music, businesses, startups, services. I think I've been telling you this for the past 4 weeks. I think you're in an amazing position. I think the work that you do is going to be needed more now, more than ever. I think mental health, well-being, boosting your immune system, optimizing your human potential, all this stuff is going to become so much more relevant that I think you've got a head start, and the Breathwork Academy is going to help people achieve that and get to better know. Because, I told you this, right? If you can control your breath, you can control your world. And I think that's why people need to be paying attention. That's why I think your Instagram stories every day at 9 a.m. have just been exploding over the last few weeks, why your following's just been growing, because you're showing up, you're figuring out 2 things. Agree with me or not? Do you think it's true that if COVID-19 had happened, you wouldn't have done a daily 9 a.m. Instagram live?
Pretty sure I wouldn't, yeah.
Right? Because all sorts of stuff gets in the way. You would have made up excuses, you don't have time, blah, blah, blah. But suddenly, because you're in that situation, you're stuck. You came up, with this creative outlet. So I think it's what I say to everyone. First of all, let's make hope go viral. I used to say, let's make hope go pandemic, but then I thought it's a bit insensitive. So let's make hope go viral. And we've got to share stories of hope where we've seen things, whether that's helping each other, whether that's some amazing human feats that we've seen, or just being of service. Okay. I think that's when who said this? I think it's Ed Millett or something like that. I said something like, if you're feeling hopeless, become helpful. And it's like, if you're so focused on yourself about your own misery, find a way to help someone else. Even if it's just having a conversation. You probably know something, expertise, information, knowledge that you can share. And if anything, share that for free, right? You can charge for implementation, but share it for free so that people can experience and you can give back. Because I've been telling this, during my Q&A sessions, people will look back in this period and ask you, what did you do? What happened during this time? Like, for example, I'm trying to finish my book. So I'd love to look back and say, I've finished writing my book. I'm trying to keep on helping people like you and, people I'm serving, clients. And you're going to have to look back and say, did I just sit and binge watch Netflix for 2 months and just complained and struggled? Or did I try and do something? And I think we're going to be looking for COVID-19 credentials. It's a weird concept, but it's basically looking back and say, what did I do to help? Because our kids and grandkids and nephews and whatever, even if you don't have kids, will ask us, this will be studied in history books. This is going to be the same thing that when I used to ask my grandparents about the Second World War, what was it like to fight, Nazi Germany and hide messages and all this kind of stuff on your bike? They're going to ask us, what was it like to live during this global lockdown and where everybody was fearing each other and you were all having physical distancing and masks and all this stuff? And I think it's going to be an opportunity to say, well, we did the most of it. And look, we're all in different situations. I've got young kids. It's a very, very different situation than my mates, even like you, who don't have kids around and have more time to serve, more time to take care of yourself. And it's amazing. I'm not saying I'm jealous, not gonna lie, a little bit jealous of it. But I think Yaya Baka taught me this. It's about I want what I have now. You've got to want what you have now. The challenges, the struggles, the gifts, everything. You want to want that. If not, you're in conflict with reality, and that's how you cause misery and unhappiness, as far as I'm concerned.
That's amazing. And that's a perfect way to look at this and actually see this as a,
Does this make sense? By the way, people listening and tuning in, does this make sense? Like, I don't know if anybody's still listening. Maybe they're just
still paying attention.
Like,
maybe still just looking at
everyone's just left. But type in, yeah, cool, we're getting a few messages. Yeah, just want to check, because I'm rambling on.
Cool.
But I just want to know that kind of makes sense, if anything's landing.
I think we can open up for some questions, because I think this is a perfect place we kind of stopped right now, and for me that's that's exactly what I wanted to hear from you, and hear for myself once more, and kind of recognize the importance of the current situation, and kind of see it as an opportunity, as an exciting time more than anything else.
But that, just before we go to Q&A, that is pretty much everything about life. Like, anything you're going to get is a choice of how you experience it, not the experience itself, but how you experience or relate to it. I'm not making little of anyone's experience. Everyone's gone through different challenges, struggles. I mean, we're looking at like a whole spectrum of experiences. What I found to be true in my own experience, people I've coached, people I've worked with, people I've seen, is how do you relate to that? And what's the story you make up about that? If you keep on telling yourself that you're the victim of the story and it's happening to you, then it's really difficult to rise. But if you find a way to actually say, what can I learn from this? What's the gift of this? What can I grow from this? How can I rise? That's when it gets really exciting, Barker came up with this acronym, which I thought was really cool. He was describing that fear was face everything and run, or face everything and rise. And I love that, because that is what we have right now, this opportunity for everybody tuning in, whether that's live or listening to this. You're going to have to look back at yourself and say, did I make the most of it? Or did I just dread the whole way through and came out, just miserable? Anyway, I'll shut up, open up to the floor. Love to hear some of the, questions.
I think how we can do this, guys, if you drop in, if you want to speak in the chat, and then I can unmute you. So write something in the chat if you have a question, please. So if you have anything. And guys, so any questions, anything you want to add, so please drop in the chat, and I can unmute you and you can ask a question. Or alternatively, you can just type up your question in a chat. Yes, Priscilla. Cool. And you are unmuted right now, so please speak and tell us. Yes.
I will try to make my English clear.
Oh, that's perfect.
If you struggle, I speak a bit of Spanish. I'm not amazing at Spanish, but just in case, you can try in Spanish and I can translate it if you need me. Not saying that you need me, but I can do my best to try. If there's, and then I'll just make up whatever I think I heard.
I will do my best to do it in English. I have two kids, one of 23, a girl of 23, and a boy of 19. For me, it's clear what you are talking about. I hope I can make it, I can manifest, but I'm worried because I don't know how to express my kids that the way of their living is going to change, even that they are millennials. I think they are, I don't know how to help them or what to tell them, or because everything changed for them. My girl is an architect and she don't have any projects right now. My boy couldn't finish his last year of high school. I think it's no. He was going to have a nice travel for in Europe. Everything changed, and they have been having a good attitude, but I feel that I don't know what to tell them. That's it.
Got it. Cool. Thanks. If I can sum up what you're saying, is that you've got two, I'd say young kids. I would say grown-up kids, 19 and 23. I'd consider those grown-up kids when you've got a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old at home. But there's a caring element to this, which is you're worried about them. That the world's changed for them and that you're struggling to know what to say. Is that kind of what, if I had to sum up what you said? Yeah, cool. So first of all, I want to acknowledge what you're saying, which is, yes, things have changed. And I think from people who haven't finished their studies, people who had work, lost jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to steal something from a friend and a colleague called Daniel Priestley. He's the founder of Dent Global. And he wrote an article on entrepreneur.com. And effectively he said that recessions, despite the economic gloom and doom and fear of it all, is an opportunity for reinvention. And he often says, use the word recession and replace it with reinvention. And again, you know how we talked about control? It's about letting go of what you think it should be. So when all this kicked off, I'm not going to lie, this is just being real with you right now. I had a couple of days of real downtime where I thought, oh my God, public speaking might be over. Like what I'd been doing for the last 18 months and loving and focusing on and going on stages and conferences and companies and sharing my message and being on purpose and serving and helping, and that might be gone. And I had to face that. I couldn't run away from it. And whether that's true or not is irrelevant. It's about letting go. And so there's two things about that. There's one about them is like, what if we saw the excitement and opportunity and transformation and change? And what do we need to do in order to do that? The first thing is letting go of what should be and what we think it should. The second thing is you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Like, and as a parent, I get that, okay? But you're putting a lot of pressure that you need to have all the answers. What I've been telling to leaders going through this is an opportunity to show your humanity and that you're a real leader, which is you don't have all the answers. You don't need to have all the answers. You can be real and honest and say, these are unprecedented times, challenging times. I'm not 100% sure how we're going to get through this, but this is where I talk about optimistic. Optimism, and this is Simon Sinek that I kind of explained this best. The difference between being optimistic and positive is the following. Optimistic is not denying the reality. Things are hard, things are challenging right now, but they're going to get better in the future. Positivity is saying everything's great, everything's fine, even when they're not. And we don't need positivity, we need optimism right now. So what I would invite you for your kids is to embrace the optimistic mindset of believing that there will be a better future. Whether we don't know what that looks like, we don't see it yet, it's there. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like when you're excited about something happening, you're not sure what it is, but you can feel it's going to be there. That's what Leadership 101 is. Like Leadership 101 is the ability to dream up a dream and convey it to people in a way that they can believe it's possible. Okay? And so do you have that ability to have an optimistic dream for your kids to say, who knows? Who knows what will tomorrow be? But what I know is it's going to be okay. And it's probably going to be better than we ever thought it would be. It's going to be different, but it's going to be okay. And then the third bit of, I guess, to that question is ask them what they need. Like, don't make up that you have to have all the questions. Like, what are you guys making up? Like, what's keeping you up at night? What's the challenge you're going through right now? What are some of the anxieties you have? And put the ball back in their court. Don't make up that you need to have all the answers. Does that make sense, Priscilla? You can just type in the chat room. But does that make sense?
Yes, it makes me sense. And I trying to make the three conclusions you talked to me. And yeah. I think I got it.
Cool.
Hope to be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Por supuesto.
Perfecto, Mark. Gracias.
Thank you. That's awesome. That's perfect. Any other questions? Anything else that you guys might have for Mark? And yeah, so that's a great answer. And like finding this ability to change your perspective and see this as exciting opportunities. That's.
I mean, one of the things I used to say is like when I used to introduce myself, it's like I help leaders come up with a future worth striving for. And you know, it's no different today. Like while people are kind of thinking about their question and anything goes, by the way, like just pick my brain. I'm here for another 10 minutes. Take this opportunity. There's no such thing as a silly question. Please go ahead. Cool. We've got two questions. We've got Suri came in first.
Suri. So Suri, you are unmuted. So please, please speak.
Okay. Hi guys. Thanks
Hi.
very much for sharing. Mark, there's so many different tangents I could go off on your conversation. I guess the one that's standing out for me right now is just the way that we are all interacting. So first of all, these are just some reflections, just what you were talking about in terms of how we can be of service and of help during this time. That's, it's great. I absolutely agree with you. But I'm also thinking about, I felt that I was in this like real sort of rat race right before and coming up and leading up to this. And I can remember having conversations with my friend and saying, something's going to give very, very soon. And it did. This thing just came at us from nowhere, left wing. So there's something about the power of slowing down and stopping, but then also just how we interact with each other in what was quite a virtual digital world. And we've taken that to a completely different extreme now as well. So how, I guess my question is, in a long-winded way, what does that look like going forwards? And especially with the current generation, the young generation, what's that going to look like going forward?
Yeah, great question. So what's interesting is this adapted, by the way. The more I was delivering this workshop in companies and getting real Q&As with employees and leaders and stuff, the more they educated me and actually, taught me a lot. And what's interesting is that there's been a spectrum of reactions to this heavily digital world that we're going through right now. And what I mean by that is, the class, and I don't want to stereotype, but let's say you've got extroverts, ambiverts, and introverts, right? And you've got also situational extroverts and that kind of stuff. But effectively, people will need different things. So people like me who are more on the extrovert side of the spectrum, I really miss connecting. Like even when I'm chatting with Arthur or a common friend, Tony Riddle, or like any of my mates, I just don't have time at the moment to connect as much as I would like to my mates. I can't go out. Like one of my biggest regrets is that Arthur and I were supposed to roll in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
Over that, and we kept on trying to schedule it and postponing it, and both of us, mixed up.
It took months. It took months.
And one of my regrets is that we didn't make it happen. But let that go. So to go back to your question, it's to understand what your needs are, and that's what I say to companies and organizations. I say, you need to figure out and understand that people are going to have different needs. What I mean by that is that you're going to have people living on their own, extroverts, missing social contact, and they want to be connected. Like I've talked, so I based my new workshop around 100 plus conversations with employees and leaders and CEOs and founders across the world. And I spoke to someone in LA, and he said that he used to have a company with remote founders and employees, and they used to have a Zoom like constant feed. So they would have like a Zoom meeting, and they would all be there working from home, and they wouldn't talk to each other, but they would just be there. And then once in a while they'd say like, hey, what do you think of this? So they were connected like 24/7 during the day. On the other end, you've got people who actually are really happy about the disconnection and the slowing down. Like I got an email from one of my members of my newsletter who basically said she's an introvert and she's never been happier, because there's no FOMO. She's got her own space and she's loving it. So those are kind of the two spectrums. But then what happens is that there's been a bleeding of work into our lives. And so we suddenly feel, and this, we haven't got time to go into this because I think this is a fascinating topic, but up until recently, when I spoke to companies about the future of work and how millennials and Gen Y are going to be much more working from home than any other generation, the problem that often came was trust. Because the old school managerial techniques is, if I don't see you, I don't know if you're really working, right? Like if I don't know what you're doing, then how can I make sure that you're actually saying what you're doing? Because you're a bit of a lazy, by nature, employees, the old school is you're lazy, you need to be incentivized, or you don't work hard. So what's happening is that people now working from home feel that they need to work extra hard. Like they need to be extra online and reply to every single email and be connected all the time, just in case someone thinks that they're slacking and watching daytime TV instead of, responding to emails. But Graham Alcott basically taught me this from Think Productive. Amazing guy, got amazing books called, Productivity Ninja, and go and check out his books. But he's the one who taught me this. And it's effectively saying, having really clear boundaries is really important. So whatever you're on that spectrum, have your clear boundaries on what's okay, what's not okay. So for you, it might be to say, it's okay for you to invite me to a pub quiz, to a fancy dress party, to a virtual coffee, but it's not okay for you to expect me to say yes to all of them. And I had a conversation in the Q&A with someone saying, I feel like I have to lie now about all the professional and personal invitations I get online. And I said, why are you lying? Like, your integrity is at cost. Just say it. Say, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm going to have to take care of myself, my needs, my mental health right now. I need to get some space. I've been watching a screen for 8 hours, zoomed out. So I'll try and catch up next time. Arthur's been inviting me every week to go and you can confirm this, but he's been every week to go and do his breathing session. I can't make them. But every time he's invited, thank you so much for the invitation, brother. I can't make it this time, but I hope I can make it another time.
That's
and that's
the truth. And I totally don't mind, because I know you're busy. Yeah.
Because it's the truth, right? Like, it's just the truth. And I feel, so anyway, so that's like the summary of your question. I hope that answered it in some way. And then what that's going to look like in the future, I think it's like anything. It's a pendulum. Okay. So I lived in South Africa for a while. I used to, once upon a time, I used to have a job where I lived around the world in countries like Kazakhstan, Lithuania, Peru, and all this stuff, which is why I've got a bit of an understanding of Spanish, Priscilla. But I lived in South Africa, and I was there. So this was in 2008, right before the World Cup. And what was fascinating was I was talking with people who had just come out of apartheid. 1994, Nelson Mandela elected president. Ubuntu education had been going on for decades. And we're talking about a country that was deeply wounded. And so you're having conversation with people who, from taxi drivers to CEOs, about what it was like to live during that time. And what happened is that the government implemented a policy which was called Black Economic Empowerment, BEE. And effectively, I believe, I don't remember this, so please don't quote me on this, but I think it was that every organization or company, or at least public company, had to have 50% or 51% of the board to be of Black members. And so that caused a lot of stir. Like, people were saying, oh my God, it means it's no longer based on your skills, but on your race. And I'm like, guys, this has been going on for decades, that where race actually was, a selective criteria for everything. But there was a lot of anger. And the way I see it, it'd gone so far in one way, apartheid and segregation, that it needed to rebalance. It needed to come back to a point of equilibrium. And for that, the pendulum needs to shift. The same thing with the Me Too movement, right? So I believe the Me Too movement was needed for a shift in consciousness around our interactions between women and men. And for some people, feel really challenged by that. People say, oh my God, but it's good. But we needed this. Like, we needed this conversation to happen so that women and men, but mostly men, can realize that actually some attitudes that we might have taken for granted is not okay, right? And so the same thing with this technology. What I believe is going to happen is we're going to go crazy on technology and digital and everything, blah, blah, and it's going to find its natural way. Nature always has a way to find an equilibrium point. It always does. So whether that's 6 months, 2 years, or 6 years, I don't know what the answer to that is, but we are going to see a shift in how we operate digitally, and we're going to have way more boundaries around how to use technology than we did before. Does that, sorry, I know that was a little long-winded answer, but let me know if that, just with the chat, if that's a yes or no.
Amazing.
Yes, thanks.
That's yes.
Cool. We've got one last question.
Last one. Have you? Yes. Cool, Kevin. Yeah, if you could unmute yourself, or I'm unmuting you. So what is your question?
Hi, Mark. I love how you took a historical and philosophical perspective. And you mentioned the events that sort of shaped the perspectives of different generations, like 9/11 with travel and the financial crisis with job security. You mentioned how you think COVID will change the way we interact and our sort of cleanliness practices. How do you think it will change our psyche or our perspective on the world going forward?
Oh, I love that question. So I'll tell you why I love that question. I'll tell you why I love that question, because I think it's a conversation we're not having enough. And I can tell you what my wish is. I don't know if this is what's going to happen, but here's my wish. My wish is that we can carry on once we are released in some way, shape, or form. I really believe, and in my heart of heart, what my hope is that we can carry on remembering what it was like to not have the freedom and liberty to have everything that we used to have. One of the biggest criticisms I used to have in companies when I talked about millennials was this idea that we were self-entitled, difficult to manage, the me generation, instant gratification, that we had everything. I'm not here to say that millennials are saints. There's a lot of stuff that we need, to grow and all this stuff. What I will say is this, though. all this generation that we've had, you know, from if you look at like a couple of decades ago, even like 10, 15 years ago, the only thing you could get delivered at your home within 30 minutes was a pizza, right? So like that was pretty much the only thing you could do. Then suddenly everything became instant, like from the movies we watch to, you know, you could even pay for someone to queue for you in a restaurant, TaskRabbit, right? Like you could pay for someone to queue for you to go and buy the latest iPhone for 4 hours so that you'd have to, like, it just got so crazy that suddenly everything was taken away from us. Well, not everything, right? We still got Netflix and Amazon and all this kind of stuff, but everything was taken away from us. And I feel like it's a leveling playing field that's happening right now. And the two things for me, and I can tell you personally, the two things that maybe two or three, I'm sure there's more, but one of them is, first of all, just how much I didn't appreciate enough the NHS and the medical system and service that we have in place here in the UK, right? Especially when you look at what's happening in the US. But effectively, it's to go, I really hope that gratefulness and that gratitude, right, for like the people, the care workers, the critical workers, is going to carry on. Second of all, things like nursery, like, so we used to put our daughter in a nursery. Oh my God, like homeschooling kids has made me realize how like difficult their job is. And you know, they used to come and complain, not complain, but they used to make jokes about, oh my God, you know, your daughter was like, da 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 da. I'm like, hey, isn't that your job to kind of like figure out how to control? Now I'm her dad and I can't fucking do it. So I'm going, oh my God, like a whole shift of perspective and appreciation. That's the second thing. The third one is how easy it was for us before to interact and move around. And what tends to happen is that when we get something taken away from us, we either miss it more or appreciate it more. The problem is, historically speaking, we have a tendency to forget, right? Like one of the problems with us as a species, that it's also a coping mechanism, by the way, is that we forget. That's why often women forget about the pain of childbirth in order for us to continue reproducing ourselves. Because if they remembered like viscerally the pain that they go through, it'd be very difficult to convince to get pregnant again. But that's another conversation. So I think from a psyche perspective, my hope is that we become more grateful, hopefully slow down a little bit. And you know, it's interesting because for those of us who've been building an online business for the last few years, it's not that it's the time of reckoning, but it's like people who used to make fun of online businesses, like especially brick and mortar businesses, people that like all traditional businesses, it's kind of changed on its head. So I think we're going to see a different perspective in relationship to online and digital. But the long answer, actually, Kevin, I don't know if that answers in any kind of way, is I hope that we'll become more grateful and more connected. Because the other alternative is we become more fearful. The other alternative is that we become more fearful of each other. That we feel like you've got a virus and that you're infected, and that I don't want to come anywhere near you. Like I legit can't wait to hug Arthur. Like legit. Like next, like just, you know, that's the thing I miss, because I'm a hugger, like by nature. And,
yes.
and I miss that. I miss that physical aspect. So I think we're going to be more curated in our connections. You know, I think one of the interesting that's come out of this is I don't have time to make necessarily new, deep, meaningful relationships and connections with people. Instead, I'm deepening the relationships I've had with people because I've been a bit of a crappy friend. Does that make sense? So like, for example, I'll give you an example. This is real. Like on Saturday, so the way that we have a model in my wife where we kind of split with the kids, she takes care of more 100%. But I'll take care of Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, and Wednesdays. On Saturday morning, I'm cooking breakfast for our kids. And I listen to music and I'm like, oh my God, that reminds me of one of my really good mates. I was like best mates with this guy for a few years. We were 14 to 16, 17. I haven't spoken to him in years. I know he's got a kid about the same age as my daughter. So I called him up and he picked up FaceTime. And I was like, oh my God, man, it's so good to see you, dude. Like, what have you become? Like, how are you? And I think this is the gift. Like, these are some of the gifts that I'm seeing from this, is to deepening the relationships we have, being grateful. Like, I've never spoken so much to my parents. I've never spoken so much to my old mates. Yeah. Does that make sense? Everyone's cool with that? Oh, I know we're short on time. Are you able to share later a list of some reading materials in relation to this, please? Yes, if you go to I can try and type it. If the Unconventionalists, theunconventionalist.com/resource. Resources. I can't remember if it's an S, but I think it's theunconventionalist.com/resources.
And Mark, where can people find you, more about what you do and find and connect with you? So
yeah,
so
so the website, if you want to get more information about the work I do, is markleruste.com. That's MARKLERUSTE.com. And then come and find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. I'm just not as active, but pretty much any social medias, find me at Mark Leruste. And yeah, come and say hi. If anything that we talked about today resonated, make sure to tag us with Arthur. Like, you might want to take a screenshot of your phone if you're listening to this, or take a screenshot of this video if you're watching it. Share it with your friends. Tell them that they need to listen to this if it was helpful. Because maybe it wasn't. Maybe everyone's just like, this is awkward. This was terrible. This is like an hour wasted.
And also, for those of you guys who are on the call, I will send you an email with some of the notes from Mark and anything else that he can, think of or add, and you'll get an email from us as well. So, yeah, Mark, thank you very much for this. Thank you for taking your time, and really, really appreciate that. Was so enlightening and
cool, man.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you guys for tuning in and watching this live. That's
cool experience, huh? Like, even for me, like, first time. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, just grateful. And you know what? Here's what I'll say: find the hope, because it's always around. And when in doubt, serve and help others. That's it.
That's amazing. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.